Hi, welcome again, everybody, to our Midwest BDC Working Groups podcast series. My name is Jacob Serfling, and again, I'm the Director of Building Decarbonization Policy and Projects here at Midwest BDC. The Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition is working to decarbonize the Midwest building sector by 2050. And our focus states are Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, and Ohio. Much of our work takes place in different working groups with our members that are organized by topic area, with most of them meeting monthly on Zoom. So these podcasts should be a good peek into what those different groups are working on, if they're not one that members or folks outside of Midwest BDC have engaged with in the past. So joining me today to talk about our local codes and standards working group, we have Joanne Lee, policy manager here at Midwest BDC, and Eslun Tucker, a longtime member of the local codes and standards working group. So Eslun has a consulting firm called HD+G and is also in the process of launching a startup focused on net zero building, faster, cheaper, and better, building the green economy by addressing our housing shortage, climate justice, as well as jobs and income inequality in Justice 40 communities. As a developer, she is acutely aware that our construction industry has built houses and buildings in pretty much the same way for the last 100 years. It's about time we apply a new approach to tackle both the housing and climate crisis, building homes faster, cheaper, better than ever before. Eslun has been very involved with, as I said, with the local codes and standards working group over the past year or so. The purpose of that group is to identify and educate about opportunities in building energy codes, stretch codes, building performance standards, all electric new construction requirements, and other potential local government levers for decarbonizing buildings. So with that, Eslun and Joanne, if you want to introduce yourselves as well and add anything to that. Otherwise, we can get into some questions about what the local codes and standards working group have been working on.
Hi, all. I just want to say I'm glad to be here today to talk about local codes and the important work of building decarbonization to help us tackle the climate crisis that we have, but also the housing crisis. So, good to be here to talk to you again and share my perspectives and to talk about the work that we've been doing on the committee.
Perfect. Thanks, Eslun. And hi, my name is Joanne Lee. If we haven't met before, I am the policy manager here at Midwest BDC. I use she, her pronouns, and I am calling from Illinois.
Great. Well, Eslun, like I said, you've been involved with the local codes working group for a long time. Refresh my memory. How long have you been involved with Midwest BDC now? I feel like it's been a couple of years since we started working together.
Yes, it has. And I, in one sense, it seems like it's, been a really, fast moving experience being a part of Midwest BDC and being a part of local codes. I maybe several months after getting involved with Midwest BDC, I had the opportunity to co-chair the local codes committee, and I've been doing that for about a year or so, a little over a year.
Great. Great. Well, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, Eslun, because I know that's been a big reason why it's been so valuable to have you involved with the working group, because you were involved so intimately with that process in Kansas City. Can you just kind of give us a little bit of background on what your role has been in that local code adoption process and what that's all looked like for folks who are new to this conversation?
Well, sure. So, back in probably starting in 2020, um, um, there was opportunity here locally in Kansas City, Missouri, to get involved in doing something different with respect to our local codes. Up until about then, basically when the new building codes were coming out, and when a city or state had an opportunity to review and update their building codes, the one big player in the room would always be the Home Builders Association, the industry people. And this was very different in that a bunch of us showed up who were a combination of not just developers and builders, but architects, people who were in the healthcare sector, people who were climate activists. All of us, converged, on that meeting that day and sort of upended things and changed the trajectory. The builders, when you look historically too, whether it's Kansas City or other jurisdictions throughout the Midwest, they were always used to getting their way and basically, tamping down in many respects on the movement of the building codes to keep it more attractive to them with respect to changing the building codes. And they were basically, poised to do the same thing. Kansas City, actually, during that time, was still on the 2012 building codes, but effectively, because of all of the weakening amendments, we were at the 2009 building codes. And so, and again, we were during a time of 2020. So years and years and years behind. And then, of course, there was similar for the jurisdictions in the surrounding metro area, where they were stuck back in the past. And it wasn't to say that there weren't some builders that were building well above the building codes. In fact, we had one of the first, or I should say, the largest passive house development happened here in Kansas City during that time period. A project at 2nd and Delaware in Kansas City, multifamily project. And so that was huge for us. And it's also been huge that since that time, his project has been surpassed with other passive house, projects like in Chicago and New York City, for instance. But we actually had the first here in Kansas City. But back in 2020, we were not only poised to update the building codes, but also to update our climate action plan. And those became two concurrent efforts that we worked to push forward. And as a matter of fact, embedded in the climate action plan was the stipulation that the building codes would also be the latest and the greatest, building codes with respect to net zero and electrification. And so we're really proud of that as well.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off.
Sure.
But you touched on something there that I wanted to dig into a little bit. It may be back up a little bit, because you mentioned in this process that you went through in Kansas City, that the usual suspects that usually show up when you talk about building codes. It makes sense why they're there, right? That's their business. That's how they maintain what they believe is going to keep them profitable and all of those things. But I think it's a question worth getting into. And I think you touched on it by mentioning that this tied in with Kansas City's climate action plan. It's like, well, why should these other groups of folks care about this? I think sometimes you mention building codes even to environmental justice and climate justice folks, and you can start to see the eyes glaze over a little bit. It seems a little technical. It seems a little bit maybe tangential to what they care about. But Joanne or Eslun, like, how do you see this as connecting to those broader goals we have in terms of both combating climate change, but also really benefiting the health of the community?
Yes. So you just ended with bringing up the health of the community. Our electric utility company here, Evergy, has a coal plant right in the middle of one of our areas that is most vulnerable in Kansas City because of the income, because of the households with family and children, and Missouri is one of the largest states in the country that is still dependent on coal. Even though so many other states, like our next door neighbor, Kansas, has really brought down, their coal use by having more wind powered electric generation, as well as solar. Whereas we've been lagging, and then all of those stakeholders that I mentioned earlier, not just people from the healthcare sector, but people who are architects and developers as well. So again, industry people or whatever, but they embraced looking forward with respect to building and to build communities that were more resilient, to help us shore up against the impacts of climate change and extreme weather events that many people across the country are experiencing right now. Like, who would have thought it, for instance, that a community like Ashland or Asheville, well, anyhow, in North Carolina, up in the mountains, would be impacted in the way that it was because of a hurricane, coming in off the coast, and the ancillary, cloud formation and rain and flooding that happened as a result of that. And even this area is very vulnerable to droughts as well as flooding, and of course heat. Most of the deaths that occur from weather events in the country come not from cold or from tornadoes or even from hurricanes. It comes from heat exposure. And of course, we're very vulnerable in the Midwest from that, and so that's why it's important to build differently. To one, for us to participate in doing our part to bring down greenhouse gases in how we build in the built environment, because the built environment is a huge piece of that in cities around the country. The buildings as well as transportation infrastructure, and but to also again to make sure that we have housing that is more resilient and can help people and communities mitigate against the impacts of climate change. And one of the ways, of course, to do that is to have a baseline, i.e., the building codes to help get us there.
Yeah.
So that's why we all showed up, and that's why we pushed forward, this legislation that we have in place at the city of Kansas City, Missouri, in this region.
Yeah, I think anytime I'm talking to somebody for the first time about codes and why it's so critical to this work, I think I always explain it as, if you're going to solve a problem that we're in so deep on, is buildings emissions and how they contribute to climate change and health, like, you've got to stop digging the hole first. And that's codes, right? That's like, let's stop doing in new renovation to this situation in the first place. Joanne, I think the codes work at Midwest BDC was probably the first thing that I sort of threw you in the deep end when you started with us here this summer. So I'm curious, as somebody who kind of came to this a little bit new in terms of that, what has stood out to you in terms of those connections to some of the with the work that the local codes and standards group has been doing?
Yeah, I mean, I totally resonated with what both of you were saying, and definitely not digging the hole further, right? We're trying to make sure that this new generation of buildings that we're putting up are ready for these things that we talk about, re-electrification and all of those things. I think for me, it's been really interesting because it's so much more cost effective to build these energy efficiency metric things in the beginning, rather than to further down the line retrofit our buildings to accommodate them. And so I think that angle has been really interesting to me. And Eslun, I also really related to what you said about when we were talking about how do we bring people into something maybe a little bit more opaque like codes, and you were talking about indoor air quality and the health of our communities as a whole, and things like coal and things like that. So making the connection to things that people already care about, so whatever that may be, I think is going to be a really great way to kind of further engage this group.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to ask you a question, and I'm quite new to the codes group, but I'm wondering what you think is kind of the biggest win that the working group has had this year.
Well, that's easy. It's the development of our playbook, that now we're making available to the public. It's a great resource and tool for people to use, whether you're advocating at the state level, in your state, or at the city level, to have something to use to help you, do your advocacy, help you develop your strategy, and help you be successful in getting in place the latest building codes that's going to help us tackle climate change and help us tackle affordability too. And here's how it affects affordability. Kansas City is one of the cities. So even though we are a mid-sized city, our energy burden costs rank about like seventh in the nation, and that's just unconscionable. And who it impacts are the people at the bottom, the people who are living paycheck to paycheck, who are low income, where upwards of almost a third of their income, a third of their housing costs is wrapped up in heating and cooling the home that they live in and keeping the lights on. And so when you have better energy codes, and when you have buildings that are being built, whether it's multifamily housing or single family housing, where you can have solar For instance, that can help bring down your costs. And we have something here now called the Housing Energy Trust, and one of their focuses, of course, a huge focus of there is affordability. And one of the key places, again, where you can drive down the cost and make homes more affordable is in what the infrastructure is going to be to heat and cool and keep the lights on. And so the codes help us, of course, get there. Because it, again, provides a framework and it provides a baseline to help make sure that, we're electrifying our buildings and that we're, incentivizing, builders to make their buildings solar ready and EV ready, because we want more electric vehicles on the road as well, as opposed to gas guzzlers, putting more pollution, more greenhouse gases that, again, impact climate change. We need to draw all of that down. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, and we're so excited about having that playbook launched. Obviously, it drew a lot from the direct experience that you and other coalition members had in the KC area. I think that although the specific nuances and process is going to vary across the other states that we work in, the general idea in terms of what resonates and who you need to bring to the table is so universal. So it's great to work in an environment with that working group to be able to share those perspectives with each other for folks who are in a position to approach that work in their state or in their city for the first time. So great, and I know we've got about five minutes left. Eslun, we've talked so much about the help and perspective that you've been able to provide to the working group, but I'm curious to hear what you feel that you've gained from being able to kind of work across the region with other folks. What's been valuable to you in that space as you continue your work locally.
So I have gained so much from, first of all, being a member of the Midwest Building Decarbonization, I'm tongue-tied here, coalition, and like just the camaraderie and the opportunity to meet other people across the Midwest who are doing this work, and to pick up ideas from coalescing and talking and communicating with so many others, like myself, who are working, in our various communities. And so that has been a valuable experience. And then all of our different committees that we are able to join in the coalition to help us become more aware, to help us hone our skills, is valuable, and then the various trainings to help us communicate our work out to the public, and to help us sharpen our tools with what we're doing. But if I can share a couple of things with respect to the playbook real quick, that I think we also need to keep in mind that probably weren't part of what we had put in the playbook. And one is about relationship building with the elected officials that we're going out to lobby. That is so critical. That is so key, because by connecting with them, getting to know who they are on a personal level, we can identify like who our champions are, and have them from the inside really help push forward the kind of codes we want to see. That's one thing. The other key thing is we have an election coming up, and elections do matter because who we have at the table who are making these laws, who are putting forth these policies, matter, because not everybody is going to be open to making these changes, which makes it a much more uphill battle for each of us, and for us to affect the kind of changes that we need to see happen. Like you're going to have your climate deniers and so forth in many of these jurisdictions, and or you're going to have people who are kind of carrying the water for the special interests, like the Home Builders Association. That's why they were able to come and try to take another bite of the apple here in Kansas City. And thank goodness we pushed back and they failed in that attempt. But the only reason that they were able to come back and take another bite of the apple is because there were some changes on our city council that allowed them to have access and try to convince some people to do their bidding. But again, we succeeded. But those are important considerations going forward when you're advocating for local codes changes in your jurisdiction. And the last point that I want to make there is to make sure that we also, when we're looking at local codes, looking at codes in general across the board and how they impact our work, like the zoning, for instance, to make the zoning codes more equitable, and also more pliant in having different types of housing built, like the missing middle. And not just our reliance on single family housing, or the two extremes between single family and then high rises.
Right.
So,
yeah,
the points I want to leave with you.
Absolutely. It touches so many things when you're talking about doing that, and I think that was absolutely critical when we were putting that together, to make sure that we didn't map out the last step in the playbook of getting things passed, but we mapped out that last step of, and now you play defense, because this never, for as much as it seems like common sense and everybody should be on board with us, to us, obviously that's not the case. We need to be realistic about that as well. So, well, I know we're coming up on the time that we had scheduled for everybody here. So I'll just kind of throw it out for any final thoughts from Joanne and Eslun about the working group and the work that we continue to do around local codes. Joanne, you want to kick us off?
I was actually going to ask Eslun if you could, while we're all online, give us, or the folks who are listening, a little pitch for our working group.
Well, I would say, be vigilant, be persistent, don't give up, and also realize that this is part of a long game. Okay, it's not going to happen overnight, and and also realize that there are more people out there who are for you, who are with you, where you can form a broad coalition. And if you take the time to go out and educate your community, you can bring people in to support you and coalesce, with you to push this forward. Because, this is something, the climate crisis is something that affects all of us in our communities, but so is the housing crisis. And so, but the good news is that we can, because of our ingenuity and our abilities, we have within our grasp a way to tackle both of these and put us in a much better place where we land. I'm very hopeful and optimistic about that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, if any of you are ever interested in joining us, we meet the fourth Monday of every month at 10 a.m. Central. So feel free to reach out to myself or Jacob, and we will be happy to get you plugged into our local codes and standards working group.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like Eslun said, it can be a long fight and a hard one, but that's always easier when you have a supportive group to draw from and draw strength from. So we certainly hope that the local codes and standards working group is that supportive environment for you as you're doing that work locally. So. Well, thank you, Eslun, for taking time to talk with us this afternoon. Joanne, thank you for coming in and doing such strong work right off the bat with Midwest BDC. And thank you to anybody else who's been joining us this afternoon or is seeing this recording later. We hope it's been helpful for you understanding the work that this working group has been doing, and we hope to see some of you joining us soon. Thanks, everyone.